Well, welcome everyone to another exciting class. I'm excited about this class. It's one of my favorite classes, as I mentioned, largely due to the fact that we're not spending enough time educating our prospects that they can become homeowners. There's a preponderance of people out there, renters, people living with their parents, that just don't believe that homeownership is feasible anymore due to high interest rates, due to the higher cost of the purchase price of housing. They just don't think it's affordable anymore to purchase a home. And I'm here to show you, along with Tony Marino, how you can get your prospects into housing for as little as 1% of the purchase price. We have some strategies here. So I want you to lean in and pay close attention because they are some real fun and exciting strategies. So again, we'll be talking about the IHDA program and how you can use it to get your clients into housing for as little as 1% of the purchase price. A little bit about Tony Marino. He is the branch manager for the Marino team in Naperville, Illinois. He's with Guild Mortgage Company. He's licensed in Illinois, Colorado, and Florida. So any of your clients that are thinking of moving or getting a summer home in Colorado or Florida, let Tony know because he can also help you out in those states. He specializes in getting people into homeownership using the down payment assistance that we're going to talk about today. And he uses education to help people understand how they can become homeowners and own a part of the American dream. And it goes back to what I was saying today. We need to sit down with the clients and walk them through the 3 buckets of cash so their eyes are open. They realize that they can become a homeowner instead of giving a landlord the first month's rent and a security deposit. So the American dream, homeownership is still the American dream. So many people would love to be buying a home. It can be an exciting process, yet it's an intimidating process. Intimidating in the sense of, I don't know if I have enough money for the down payment. How am I going to pay for the closing costs? Oh my goodness. So, again, we're going to arrest some of those fears today. I believe in the American dream, and I feel most people still do, but they're unsure as to whether it's achievable anymore with rising interest rates. Rates are just under 7%, with down payment costs, and then the limited availability of affordable homes. The prices of homes keep going up, and people look at it and say, I just don't know if I can ever save enough money in order to become a homeowner. Well, this webinar is going to provide you with the information that's going to help it's going to help your clients qualify for at least up to $10,000 in down payment assistance. This helps clients then to continue to dream of home ownership. Why do people seek the American dream? Well, they always need to become a homeowner. Have that backyard, have that backyard for the dog to run in, to barbecue in. It's a sense of owning something instead of just renting something. But there's too much misinformation out there. Do I really need 20% as a down payment? You wouldn't believe how many people still believe that they need 20% when in essence, they can buy a home for as little as 3.5% down or 3% down if they have a high enough credit score. They learn to set aside their lack of confidence of becoming a homeowner because many think that they're years away from owning a home. We need to help them as realtors set aside that lack of confidence. For many, many years, they think, oh, I'm 5 years away from saving enough money to own a home. There's 65% of renters. This is from Zillow. 65% of renters think they can't afford to buy a home. That's a shocking statistic. That means that there's a lot of opportunity. You as realtors should be looking at, if that 65% doesn't think that it can own, you need to send them into this type of a home buying seminar where they can look at and dream that, oh my God, I can actually become a homeowner for less than my first month's rent and security deposit. But most don't know about the financial assistance. You were to ask many of the renters out there, do you know about the Illinois Housing Development Authority's down payment and closing cost assistance that's available to home buyers. Most of them would say they're not aware of it. It does enhance the quality of life. When you become a homeowner, it enhances you. It's, you have a pride of ownership. It does enhance the quality of your life. Like I say, you're barbecuing in the backyard. You're socially hosting fun events at your home. And it helps individuals with wealth building and equity appreciation. Statistics show that those who own homes have a 45% greater net worth than those who rent. So, what are the advantages of home ownership? Well, it's a place of your own versus renting or living with your parents. I got to believe that that's an enhancement in the quality of your life. It gives you stable housing costs versus rising rental costs. Each year, landlords seem to be raising the rents versus if you get into a 30-year fixed rate or a 15-year fixed rate loan, that's going to remain stable over those many years. It builds equity in your home asset, which builds wealth. As you pay down the mortgage, as the house appreciates, the difference between the value of the home and the mortgage balance is called equity. And that builds wealth. That helps you to increase your net worth in America. You get tax deductions for being a homeowner. You get to deduct the interest expense and the real estate taxes that you pay. And you can borrow against the equity you build up in your home for your next dream home. Because if you sell the house 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road, you've built up a whole bunch of equity that you'll realize in net sales proceeds that can use as the down payment on a bigger home as your family expands into 1, 2, 3 children. You can buy a second home with the equity, keep the primary residence, borrow against the equity you've built up and use that as the down payment for a vacation home. Or you can borrow against the equity and 3, invest in an Airbnb, a rental home where you can rent it out to people. You can get rental income on a monthly basis to cover that mortgage payment on that investment property. Or you can just do cash out on that equity for some other investment, putting money into the stock market. The stock market is doing extremely well these days. So possibly you want to take some cash out and participate in the appreciation in the stock market. Or lastly, you can convert that equity into cash later when you retire by getting into what's called a reverse mortgage. Once again, the advantage of home ownership is that homeowners have 45% greater net worth than do renters. So who can use $10,000 of down payment assistance? And again, there's three types of down payment. There's $6,000, $7,500, and $10,000. So again, who can use any of those? And again, we're going to go into greater detail as to what those down payment assistance consist of. But who can use that? Well, of course, renters can. But how about existing homeowners? What if somebody's coming out of a condo and the condo market is not, doing as well and they haven't built up as much equity and they could use $10,000 of down payment assistance? Well, an existing homeowner is eligible for down payment assistance. Your sons, your daughters, millennials. Just because I own a home, that doesn't mean that I'm not looking out for my daughters. 2 of my daughters took advantage of down payment assistance from the state of Illinois. And again, you should be doing the same thing for your sons, your daughters, your cousins. These are people that can absolutely, family members that dream of home ownership. Any of your brothers, your sisters that are thinking of home ownership, but what's keeping them from buying? Well, maybe they're just missing the down payment. What if you were to help them, let them know that there's $10,000 of assistance? Friends, you meet with friends on a weekly basis. You get together with them, you barbecue with them, and you find out that they're still renting and they don't believe that they can be a homeowner. And maybe what you need to do is encourage them because that they might be eligible for $10,000 of down payment assistance and purchase a home for as little as 1% of the purchase price. Who can use that down payment assistance? Anyone who thinks they can't buy a home because they did not save enough money for down payment. And anyone who's interested in buying a home for less than 1 month's rent and security deposit. Doing a little research, I noticed that if somebody were to rent out a $400,000 home, or if they were to rent out a 2-bedroom apartment in the Chicagoland area, they might be paying close to $3,000 a month in rent. plus another $3,000 in security deposit. So our prospects are sitting on about $6,000 in funds. And again, thinking that all they can do is rent, and we're going to try and turn that thinking around and show them how they can become homeowners in this environment. Buying a home is a huge step, but buying a home doesn't have to be that challenging. They're self-defeating themselves by saying, I don't think I can become a homeowner. Maybe they're just missing the down payment. So what if we can help them with the missing down payment? What if we can help an individual overcome that financial barrier to home ownership? Because financial assistance, down payment assistance, is typically not only assistance for the down payment, but it's also assistance for closing costs. And the Marino team, led by Tony Marino, can provide you with access to the IHDA, the Illinois Housing Development Authority, access programs, the $6,000 grant, the $7,500 zero interest loan, or the $10,000 zero interest loan that's repayable. So here are the three programs, and we'll briefly touch on each. Let's go first to the first column where it says it's a $6,000 forgivable grant. So it is forgivable over a 10-year period. So again, if I get $6,000 again, 10 years times 12 months, that's 120 months. Every month I stay in the house, 1/120th of the $6,000 is forgiven. So, and again, if for some reason you don't stay in the house for 10 years, let's say that you stay in the house for, let's say, 6 years of the 10 years. Well, that means then that probably about $3,000 has been forgiven, or maybe $4,000 of the $6,000 has been forgiven. So you still owe $2,000. Well, that's just going to be paid at the closing. When you sell the house, because you're not living there anymore, when you sell the house, you're going to pay off your first mortgage and you're going to pay off the remaining $2,000 grant. There is no interest, there is no principal. You just pay off any non-forgiven amount of that grant. The second one is the $7,500 zero interest loan. I call this the crazy good program. I love this program. There's zero interest, so they give you $7,500. There's zero interest and zero payments every month. So the whole principal amount is due in 30 years. That sounds like a great idea. Or if you sell the house sooner than 30 years, which is more realistic, more people are going to say, well, I'll probably, upgrade. I might sell the house within the next 10 years. Again, what happens when you sell the house in 10 years? There's zero interest owed. And at that point in time, you'll pay off the first mortgage balance and you'll pay off the $7,500. But in the meantime, for 10 years, you got the use of $7,500, never had to pay interest, never had to pay principal, and you've just paid off out of sales proceeds. It's a great program. And then lastly, the $10,000 program. It is, again, a zero interest loan. I like that, zero interest. However, there is a 10-year repayment of principal only. So let's take a look at that. 10 years times 12 months is 120 payments, right? So if I divide 120 into $10,000, that means I have to pay $83.33 a month. So I tell a lot of my clients, a lot of Tony's clients, hey, if you were to take, your significant other out for dinner this weekend, how much would you spend on, dinner and drinks? They say, well, it depends on the restaurant. We might spend $60, $80, $100. I go, well, if you gave up just one of those meals a month, would you have $83.33 a month? They said, absolutely. So I can give you $10,000 and you're willing to pay back $83.33 in principal only with no interest. They said, for $10,000, you got a deal. So let's look at some of the eligibility requirements of the IHDA down payment assistance programs. First off, it's available to first-time and non-first-time home buyers. So if you're a homeowner today, you still can take advantage of these three programs. Obviously, we're going to talk about you have to stay within the income limits and the purchase price limits which are very generous, and we'll see that later on. You must purchase a 1 or a 2-unit single family within the state of Illinois. So a 3 and 4 unit property would not qualify. And we're going to focus a little bit on that 2-unit property, again, making housing much more affordable for a lot of our prospects in today's environment. The borrower must owner occupy it as their primary residence. You can't purchase it and then rent it out and say, this is my investment property. So no non-occupant co-borrowers are allowed. A fancy term for no mom and dad. Mom and dad are not going to occupy the property for son or daughter. So you can't get a co-borrower who's not going to occupy the property. It's good for 30-year fixed rates on almost any type of a loan. A conventional loan from Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, a VA loan if you're a veteran, FHA, USDA, any of those loans, you will also, in addition, get a down payment assistance. Again, we'll look at income and property limitations shortly. The minimum credit score, it's 640 for FHA, for USDA, for the government VA loans. For conventional, it's 640. Well, I don't know about you guys, but most clients have at least a 640 credit score. It's not that difficult. And if it is difficult, if you have a prospect that doesn't have a 640 or better credit score, Tony can do what's called credit repair. He can come back with what if scenarios. What if they were to pay off this collection? What if they were to bring this past due current? And he can tell you how many basis points that's going to increase their score, such that we can get them up to the 640 and make them homeowners. The maximum debt to income ratio is 50%. That's really liberal. However, if it gets between 45.01 and 50%, FHA will require a credit score of 680. The borrower must contribute 1% of the purchase price or $1,000 from their own funds, whichever is greater. Well, we're going to look at a $400,000 purchase using this program, and of $400,000, 1% would be $4,000. So again, if they contribute $4,000, which remember, our client theoretically has $3,000 in the bank for security deposit, $3,000 for the first month's rent. So they're sitting on $6,000. So that $4,000, that's not outside of their realm of possibility. And last but not least, homeownership counseling is required. They can do it online. And, it's actually especially for those that have not been homeowners, it's a great class for them to attend. Interest rates. The great thing about the IHDA down payment assistance program is that there's only one interest rate offered each day, meaning for that 30-year fixed rate FHA, conventional, VA, only one interest rate. So no matter where your client goes, they can go to Bank of America, to Wells Fargo, they can go to Tony Marino at Guild Mortgage. They all have to offer the same rate. And by the way, not everyone has the IHDA programs. You have to become a certified IHDA lender, which Guild Mortgage is. The interest rate is the rate for the borrower's first mortgage loan, the FHA, the conventional, the VA, the USDA. The IHDA down payment assistance is really a second lien or a second mortgage on the property, with only the $10,000 zero interest loan program requiring any repayment. And we saw, how it comes up with $83.33 per month in principal only payments. Here's today's interest rates. This is the $6,000 program, the forgivable grant. It's 7.25. Here's the $7,500. It's 6.875. And lastly, here's the $10,000 program at 6.875. So we're going to just keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to use this rate when we start taking a look at what the monthly payment's going to be for our prospects. Now let's take a look at the income limitation. We, in order to qualify for the 10th, any of them, 6,000, the 7,500, or the 10,000, they have to meet income limitations. Well, most of our clients are going to be in Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, or Will. And that means that the borrower has to have made income of less than $134,520. I don't know about you guys. And again, let's make sure we understand this. The borrower versus household. The household would be anyone who's living in the house. husband, wife, child. The the IDA looks not at the combined incomes of everyone, it looks at the borrower. So if, let's use an example, if the husband was making, say, 100,000 and the wife was making 90,000, that would be a combined household of 190,000. You'd say, oh, they don't qualify. But what if we didn't have the wife as our borrower? The husband alone at 100,000, let's say he qualifies. His debt to income ratio, credit scores are all there. And so our borrower is making 100,000. It's less than 134,520. He would qualify. We move on. We've got a green light. Again, now here is the purchase price limitations. And I look at these numbers and I go, wow, these are very liberal. In Cook, in DuPage, in Kane, Lake, McHenry, and Will, for a one unit, whether it's a condo, whether it's a townhouse, a single family, it's 610,939. Well, that would be a heck of a starter home for most people. So again, very generous. Most of our prospects would be looking at homes for less than that. If they're looking at a 2-unit, which greatly reduces their monthly mortgage payment because they're getting rent out of the second unit, but they could buy almost $754,000 worth of a 2-unit under this program. So how can we structure a home purchase using the $10,000 down payment assistance? Well, let's look at the cash needed to purchase. Let's look at I call it the 3 buckets of cash needed at closing. Pay close attention to how close your client is to becoming a homeowner. Got to remember, he comes up with either $6,000 in first month's rent and a security deposit if he stays a renter, or he can come up with $13,380 in the 3 buckets cash needed at closing. Now that sounds significant, but I'm going to walk you through it and see how that is paid for by other means. Your client looks like he's halfway to home ownership, but we're going to take him all the way to home ownership. So here is the look at rent versus buying using the $10,000 down payment assistance and the 3 buckets of cash. The first bucket being down payment, the second bucket closing costs, and the third bucket is prepaid and escrows. So starting from the beginning, on a $400,000 purchase, using an FHA loan, which requires 3.5% down payment, we're going to get $10,000 worth of down payment assistance. The average closing costs are about $5,500. The IDA origination fee, because IDA requires a 1% origination fee, is $3,880. And as you guys all know, in the most recent change, the buyer has to pay a buyer's agent fee, but we're going to see that most contracts today have the seller paying the buyer's agent fee. So let's first look at the rent side. Those are all the great assumptions. On the rent side, we know if they stay a renter, it's $3,000 in first month's rent, $3,000 in security deposit for a grand total of $6,000. If they purchase, the first thing we got to realize is what is 3.5% of 400,000? Well, it's $14,000. So again, we always have to ask who pays. And the yellow items are what our client, the prospect, pays. We need them to put in 1% of the purchase price. 1% of 400,000 is 4,000. Okay, so there's 4,000 of the 14,000. And we're using $10,000 of down payment assistance from the state of Illinois. So 10 and 4 is 14,000. Put a check mark. We got all the money we need, and our client has only put in $4,000. Now, the closing costs are the $5,500 in ordinary, customary closing costs, the 1% origination fee, and the $10,000, and then the $10,000 in buyer's agent fee. Let's deal with the $10,000 immediately. We know that the seller usually pays the realtor's buyer's commission. That's typical in today's environment. So what's left is $9,380 that the seller can, the seller can pay is one of the strategies. Obviously, if one of the first strategies, our borrower can pay it if they have it. but that's been holding back people from buying. So let's take a look at, maybe it's the seller that pays. Maybe it's looking at your 401k. Most of your prospects have a 401k. Maybe they borrow from the 401k and get, two, three, four, $5,000 from their 401k. Typically, you can get a 401k loan for 50% of your vested balance. So if somebody has $10,000, 50% is 5,000, they could get a 401k loan. Or they could go to mom and dad and say, Mom, Dad, can I get a gift from you for $2,000 to help me with the purchase of my home? And again, going back to how can the seller help pay? Well, you can outright have your realtor ask the seller to pay. Seller can say no. But what if, in the negotiations, this was like a $410,000 home and you guys negotiated it down to 400,000. But Melinda says, you know what? Why don't we bump up the purchase price to 405,000? I think the appraisal will come in at least at 405. So Melinda, representing the buyer, because Melinda's got to put the contract offer together before she puts it in ink, she calls up the seller's realtor and says, hey, my client no longer wants to pay 400,000. And the voice on the other end sighs and goes, now what? We just got done negotiating. 400,000 was the price. What's the issue? He says, no, my client wants to pay more. Big smile comes across the phone. My client wants to pay $405,000, provided that the seller pays $5,000 in my client's closing costs. So now all of a sudden, it's, the realtor, the attorney for the seller, they all take out their calculator and go, 405,000 minus 5,000 that we have to pay in closing costs for the buyer nets me 400,000. That's what I had agreed to initially. So the seller has no reason not to do that. So if we get the seller to pay $5,000 of this, if we get, say, a 401k loan for 5,000, for 4,000, for 3,000, let's say it's 3,000. So now we've got 5,000 from the seller, 3,000 from our 401k, which again, that loan does not get included in the buyer's debt ratio. So when Tony qualifies this prospect, any type of 401k loan payment will not be included in the debt ratio. So let's just say that's 3,000, and he gets another, say, $2,000 in a gift from mom and dad. So 2,000 plus 3,000 is 5,000 plus 5,000 that the seller paid. That's $10,000 that he got from other sources other than himself. So it's a combination of these three, plus the fourth is the borrower might have some additional money in a savings account. But my point here is this should not be a reason not to become a home buyer just because you have some closing costs that the borrower might have to pay. There are other options, as you can see here, that make it affordable for our prospect to become a homeowner. So again, it shows 13,380 is what they have to come up with. But if we solve this 9,380 in closing costs with the seller, the 401k loan, the gift from mom and dad, that means that our client out of pocket would only have $4,000. Or he can rent for $6,000 with a landlord. Which do you think they would appreciate you sitting down with them, showing them this, and saying, they go, yeah, I've got that money in the 401k. Yeah, mom and dad would give me at least 2,000. Yeah, if you can negotiate that purchase price up, let's do that and get some closing costs paid by the seller. So again, I think this is a great opportunity for you as realtors to sit down with them. This does not have to be done by you. This can be done with Tony and you. Go through and educate your prospects. Home ownership is not $9,000, is not $13,000 away. It's only $4,000 away from home ownership on a $400,000 home. So what if the earnest money was equal to 1% of the purchase price, $4,000? How much cash would the buyer bring to closing? Well, it's 9,380 or zero. If you negotiated that the seller pay some of the closing costs by bumping up the purchase price, it's zero if you got a $3,000 401k loan. It's zero if you got a $2,000 gift from mom and dad, or any combination of those three that ends up coming up with the 9,380. How about the realtor negotiating if the seller pays some or all the closing costs? How about increasing the purchase price in exchange for the seller paying some of the closing costs? How about taking out a 401k loan? How about a gift from a blood relative? All of these strategies take care of, if you want to call this, obstacle toward home ownership. This can get reduced down to zero. So what is our housing payment then? Because then, okay, Glenn, it's all great and good. My client's only coming up with $4,000, to buy a $400,000 home. So what's the payment on a $400,000 loan? If it's a 3.5% down payment, it's FHA. Well, the interest rate is 6.875. Remember, we saw that when we were looking at interest rates. So the principal and interest is $2,580. Remember, you got to pay $83.33 for that $10,000. That's a principal only repayment. The taxes are $633, homeowners insurance, and what they call MIP or private mortgage insurance. And when you add all that up, it's $3,556 per month. Or he can pay $3,000 in rent to the landlord and own nothing. Which one do you think he would rather, do? Pay rent or own something for $3,556? And this is using today's interest rates. It is anticipated that rates are going to go down from here. They can also refinance, in 6 months, in a year. As rates come down, they can refinance. Would your client want to rent or purchase, given those options? Would they, it assumes a 6.875 on an FHA 30-year fixed rate. But what if this was a 2-unit? What if they bought and they were renting out the second unit for, say, $2,000 a month? Well, doesn't the math go, well, they'd have to pay $3,556 to the lender minus $2,000 that they got in rent. So their net out of pocket each month is going to be $1,556. That sounds pretty exciting to me if I had prospects in my database and I wanted to sit down with them, not only show them that they could become homeowners for as little as $4,000, but that they could also, if they're looking at a 2-unit, they could have a very low monthly mortgage payment. So let's summarize the 3 buckets of cash today. First off, and again, you always have to ask who pays. So bucket number 1, who pays? The down payment. The down payment is 3.5%. You and or IDA can pay the down payment. It could be, your down payment could be as little as 3% on a conventional loan if you have a high credit score. It could be 5% on a conventional loan with lower credit scores down to 620. It would be 3.5%, which is what we've been using in our example on an FHA loan, on any credit score down to 580. Again, 580 for a conventional FHA, but if you want to use the down payment assistance, this has to be at least 640, and it has to be 680 if your debt ratio goes between 45.01% and 50%. And remember, 1% is your prospect's share of their own funds that they must put in the deal if they use the down payment assistance program of $10,000, $7,500, or $6,000. So, and again, remember in our example, bucket number 1 was $4,000, 1%. Bucket number 2, closing costs. So always ask who pays. Well, there's approximately $5,500, which is called the ordinary and customary charges. Appraisals and credit reports, and there's going to be recording fees. Those are going to be in your ordinary and customary charges. Plus, as we mentioned earlier, there's an additional 1% origination fee that IDA charges if you're using the IDA funds. So again, when you add those two together, 1% plus this, you're getting a total of $1,380 in closing costs. Plus, there's a realtor's buyer's commission. But again, I mention it but it's usually paid by the seller. Our buyer is not paying this, the seller is. So again, who pays for this 9,380? Well, the buyer can pay, but let's just say he doesn't have that kind of funds. Well, IDA can pay if some funds are left over from bucket number one. In our example on the $400,000 loan, there were no funds left over. We used all $10,000 in bucket number one. Who else? Who else can pay? Well, the realtor can negotiate to have the seller pay. The seller can either agree outright to pay whatever number, a part or all. $5,000. You can ask to have the seller pay $5,000 if you go back and say you'll pay $5,000 more for the seller's home. You'll bump the purchase price up to $405,000, provided the seller pays $5,000 of your client's closing costs. Again, it's a net zero to the seller. There should be no resistance to that. The only thing you have to be mindful of is the realtor has to make sure that if they use that strategy, will the house appraise out at $405,000? The buyer, who else can pay? Well, the borrower can take out a 401k loan whose payment is not included in the borrower's debt ratio. How great is that? You could borrow 2, 3, 10,000, whatever it is, and the monthly payment to pay back that 401k loan. First off, if you take out a 401k loan, I hope everybody understands that the interest charged on that 401k loan and the principal repayment all goes into the borrower's 401k account. It doesn't go to a bank. It doesn't go to Bank of America. It doesn't go, to a financial institution. It goes, so even if the interest rate was 7, 8%, that interest that's charged on the 401k loan is going into prospect's 401k account. It's building up in the borrower's 401k account. Who else can pay? The borrower can receive a gift from a blood relative. So what if we got the seller to pay $5,000 in closing costs? What if we got a $3,000 401k loan and a $2,000 gift from mom and dad? Well, we've got all of our closing costs covered, right? And then the lender can pay some with a higher interest rate on non-IDA loans. Again, we're working with IDA. There's no, as we learned, there's only one interest rate. So this strategy only works for non-IDA loans. But again, how much of the $9,380 did our client come up with? Zero. If the seller paid $5,000, the 401k loan paid $3,000, and we got a $2,000 gift. Quite a great opportunity to become a homeowner. Bucket number 3 is prepaids or escrows. There's prepaid interest that must be paid from the date of the closing to the end of the month. Remember what I just said, or date of closing to end of month. Well, if there's 31 days in July, if I close on July 30th, I only have to pay 2 days worth of interest. Therefore, most purchases, purchase their home toward the end of the month because they don't want to pay 30 or 25 days of interest. So most attorneys, most realtors, schedule their closings toward the end of the month. Escrows are for escrowing for real estate taxes and homeowners insurance. So typically there's 2 months of homeowners insurance that's set aside at the closing. And depending upon the month you close in, there could be 2 to 8 months worth of real estate taxes escrowed at the closing. So there's enough funds for when the real estate tax bill is due and can be paid. The great thing about Illinois is that we pay real estate taxes in arrears. What does that mean? It means that we're in the year 2025, so we're paying the 2024 real estate taxes, and we pay them twice a year. So that means, and we have highlighted in red, that means that the seller in Illinois must give a credit for real estate taxes while the seller lived in the home. So if the closing is taking place on July 31st of 2025, who lived in the house from January 1st of 25 to July 31st? The seller. The seller must therefore give 7 months of, because the bill for 2025 is not going to come out until 2026. So the seller must give our prospect 7 months of real estate taxes as a credit. That credit always is greater than the escrow that's being set up for the 2 months of homeowners and the 2 to 8 months worth of real estate taxes. So this bucket is always zero, except on new construction. So for 99% of your transactions, this bucket number 3, is a zero bucket. So let's summarize our 3 buckets. How much of our clients' own funds did they come up with? In bucket number 1, $4,000, 1% of the purchase price. Bucket number 2, it was zero. Again, I didn't have any more funds left, but the seller said that they would pay $5,000 because we bumped up the purchase price. We got $3,000 from a 401k loan, and we got $2,000 from mom and dad. So it became a zero for our client. And bucket number 3 is a zero because the seller gave us a real estate tax credit. So 4,000 plus zero is $4,000. I think you guys need to be talking to your prospects. You need to be walking them through this to see if they in fact can get a $2,000 gift from mom and dad. Hopefully they're in good standing with mom and dad. Hopefully they've got a 401k. Most of your prospects are going to have some form of a 401k. So what are you and your clients waiting for? Take some action. Now that you've reviewed how little cash is needed, what's your next step? Educate your prospects. That means you do it, or you're going to get a copy of this presentation today. Give it to your clients, or better yet, why don't you and Tony sit down? Why don't you make an appointment with Tony? Sit down, walk through the 3 buckets of cash, show your clients how they can become homeowners. You can give them a co-branded flyer. I want to show you what that means. You can get this type of a flyer. Here's this flyer, up to $10,000 in down payment assistance. It's going to show the $6,000 in down payment forgiven over 10 years. The $7,500, they chose repayment is deferred for 30 years, the Crazy Good program, and the repayable program, the $10,000 with zero interest, and the principal is repaid over 10 years. And down here, we can put in your picture, your company, your email, your phone number, etc. And all you got to do is email, text Tony Marino at Guild Mortgage and tell them you want this. You guys should be walking around with a dozen of these in your briefcase and handing these out to everybody you meet, all your friends, all your family members, anybody who's thinking of home ownership. Going back to my presentation. You can also, is super important. Why don't you guys provide a monthly homebuyer seminar with Tony being your guest speaker, all via Zoom? What I mean that is, you can take this PowerPoint. Tony or myself would be the presenter. You be the host. All you have to do is just give Tony 6 to 10 emails of your prospects each month. Tony sends out the invite through our Zoom. You, the realtor, are on the Zoom call, and you act as the host, welcoming everyone. They're all your prospects, hello, saying a few words about your services while you're the rockstar realtor, and then introducing Tony. It's pretty doggone easy. We go through all these slides. We show them how ownership, can be as little as $4,000 on a $400,000 home. You look like a great educator, and in reality, several of your prospects are going to take action because you were an educator. So your goal, your homework today, what should you do next? Get your clients pre-approved for free with Tony. Tony can be reached at 847-804-1059. Obtain a free credit report. And if your client doesn't meet the minimum 640 credit score for down payment assistance, Tony can get them rescored. Tony can get them repaired if necessary. Tony will ask you to, them to assemble the necessary documentation to, for a full application. He gets an automated underwriting approval. A pre-approval letter is issued to the client, you, the realtor. Now that they have a yes, that they've been pre-approved, they go shopping with you for a home. You review the action plan with Tony. Let's make sure we know, is it the buyer that's coming up with the closing costs? Is it the seller that we're going to bump up the purchase price? Is it the 401k loan that we got plenty of money there that we can do a 401k loan? Or mom and dad are going to be more generous than $2,000. It's $3, $4, $5,000. But review the plan with Tony. Start hosting homebuyer seminars using Tony's Zoom software. It's so easy. All you have to do is go into your database, call these people and say, would you like to learn how to become a homeowner on a $400,000 home for as little as $4,000? The Team Marino way, they're committed to getting you pre-approvals in 24 hours. They're committed to financing the dream homes and always being available for questions. Tony, again, can be reached at 847-804-1059, or you can reach him at tony.marino@guildmortgage.net. You can ask Tony for the online application link if you'd like to be walking around with that. So whenever you meet a client, you can give them that link and get them pre-approved using their phone or their laptop. You can be looking for Facebook posts for further engagement, where this and other resources will be posted in our Facebook account. And I don't want you to forget about HomeBot. Again, it's a great way of staying in contact with all of your past clients and your prospects, and the system will automatically send out a touch each month, making sure that your prospects, your past clients, always remember you. Any questions, comments, suggestions?